Sometimes the strongest people are the ones nobody notices, until silence becomes a louder scream than any voice. What would you do if you saw someone humiliated in public and no one else moved a muscle? Let us know in the comments section below, and subscribe if stories of courage and dignity resonate with you, because this one might just stay with you long after the screen fades to black. His hands always moved with the same quiet grace, index finger tracing the rim of the coffee mug, thumb nudging the edge of a sugar packet like he was lining up dominoes. Calvin Shepherd sat at table 5 every Tuesday and Thursday, never asked for a menu, and always tipped in exact change plus a silver dollar. That part mattered, the silver dollar, not because it was valuable, but because it was the one thing his grandfather gave him before leaving for Korea. Ever since Cal lost his leg in Afghanistan, that coin traveled with him like an old friend, warm in his palm when his prosthetic ached or when the stares lasted too long. At that moment, though, no one was staring. Not yet. Black coffee, eggs over easy, rye toast, same as always? The waitress asked, barely glancing at her notepad. Her name was Rosie, late 20s, 2 kids, worked 2 jobs, and still found time to compliment Cal's veteran bald cap like it was brand new. "You know me, Rosie." "No surprises," he said, his voice steady but low. That was Cal Stillwater's folded newspaper, no complaints. The kind of man who didn't need to remind anyone of what he'd sacrificed because it already showed. Faintly, in the mechanical way he moved his left side or how he braced himself before rising from a seat. He was alone. Again. And yet there was a certain comfort in the solitude. The murmur of clinking forks, the drone of the local radio playing a soft Motown track, the scent of bacon and floor cleaner. Cal found peace in the ordinary, until the laughter started. Not the warm kind, not the laughter that fills booths and smells of pancakes and maple syrup. This was sharp, fractured, the sound of something jagged being dragged across linoleum. "Yo, check out Lieutenant Dan over there," one voice said. Young, nasal, coated in mockery. 3 of them. Early 20s, if that, sitting 2 booths behind Cal, angled just right so he could hear every word but not see their faces. "You think he gets a military discount, or just hops the line?" Another chuckled. "I bet he parks front row everywhere. I should fake a limp, too." The words were knives, but Cal didn't flinch, not visibly. He kept his eyes on the window, watching a leaf spin in the breeze, pretending he didn't hear. Bummed. But he heard. Veterans hear everything. Especially disrespect. He gripped the silver dollar in his coat pocket. Behind him, their voices grew louder, more confident, because no one had said anything, because silence in rooms like this was license. At the counter, Rosie hesitated mid-step, lips parted like she might say something, but then her eyes flicked to her boss, who shook his head slightly. "Not now. Not worth the trouble. Keep it moving." So she kept moving. Cal closed his eyes, just for a second, tried to let it pass. Do you think he lost it in war or just dropped it off at goodwill? The ringleader laughed, and a high-pitched snicker followed. One of the others slapped the table. Still, no one said a word. And then the door opened. Colonel Thomas Riley didn't dress like a colonel anymore. No medals, no creased uniform, just a flannel shirt, jeans, and boots that had seen more dirt than pavement. He was tall, graying, and looked like the kind of man who didn't bother with umbrellas, even in thunderstorms. He walked with purpose, not fast, not slow, just enough that people noticed without knowing why. He stepped inside. He caught at Cal's profile, at the deliberate way his shoulders didn't react, the way his jaw tightened just a little too long. Kennedy heard it. The joke. "Oh man, you think he uses that leg to get pity points? Must be nice, sitting there like a hero while the rest of us work." Colonel Riley didn't sit down. He turned. Boys in cargo shorts and branded hoodies, one with a backwards hat, another with an overdeveloped gym routine and no sense of posture. The third looked like he was there just to laugh along. The colonel studied them quietly. "I served with men like him," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but the diner went silent. "I served with men like him," he repeated, stepping closer. "Men who lost more than limbs, men who still carried their brother's blood in their dreams. And not once, did any of them ask to be called heroes." The boys froze, unsure if it was a joke. One tried to grin. "You got something to say, old man?" "I do," Colonel Riley said, folding his arms. "I say the way you're flapping your gums you wouldn't last a day under real fire, and the only thing you've sacrificed is maybe sleep after losing a video game." The backwards hat kid snorted. "Dude, chill. It's just a joke." "Jokes are meant to be funny," the colonel said without blinking. That wasn't a joke. That was cowardice hiding behind volume. The room didn't breathe. The father with 2 kids in the corner lowered his phone. The old couple near the pie counter turned. Rosie stopped pouring coffee. "You want to mock someone?" Colonel Riley continued. "Mock me. Go ahead. But you'll do it standing up, like a man, not hiding behind a booth like a teenager on a sugar rush." No one moved. Finally, the biggest of the 3 stood, hesitant, arms half raised like he was torn between puffing his chest and checking his phone. "Man, whatever," he muttered. "This place sucks anyway." He stepped out. The others followed. No swagger now, just the clumsy retreat of boys learning, for the first time, what it feels like to be small. The bell above the diner door jingled as they disappeared. Colonel Riley turned back to Cal, who had finally looked over. Their eyes met. No words passed, just a small nod. Not of gratitude, but recognition. "Table 6, the colonel told Rosie as he sat, voice calm again. "Black coffee, bacon, rye." Rosie poured without a word, her hands still trembling slightly. Behind the counter, someone clapped once, then twice. Slowly, others followed. Not loud, not a standing ovation, but enough. The silence had finally cracked, and in its place, something better had taken root. Cal waited until the coffee cooled. He wasn't in a rush. He never was anymore. Time, to him, wasn't a thing you wasted or cherished. It just was. It flowed whether you limped or ran. Across the diner, Colonel Riley sat as if he'd always been there, like a figure carved into the very architecture of the place. He stirred his coffee without sipping it, eyes forward, saying nothing. That silence stretched between them, not awkward, not forced, just familiar, like something that belonged. But everyone else? They couldn't stop glancing over. Whispered remarks passed between booths, a low tide of curiosity rising in the room. The teens were gone, but their presence still echoed in the air like smoke after a fire. Some patrons nodded to Cal as they got up to pay, subtle and respectful, like they wanted to apologize but didn't know how. He returned none of it, just sipped his now cool coffee and rested both hands around the mug like it was a small hearth. Then Rosie came by, hesitated, and leaned in close. "They come in every few weeks," she said under her breath. "Usually loud, sometimes drunk. I'm sorry, Mr. Shepard. I should have said something." Cal turned his eyes to her. He didn't smile. He just said, "It's not your job to fight battles for us." Rosie blinked at the word us, like it held more than she expected. Cal didn't elaborate. She took a breath, steadied her tray, and walked away. Colonel Riley finally stood and made his way over. No words, no preamble, just sat across from Cal like they were picking up a conversation they hadn't started yet. "Name's Tom," he said, fingers drumming once on the table before resting. "Tom Riley." "I know who you are," Cal replied. "You used to come in with your wife." Tom's lips thinned slightly. "Used to." They both paused there. That kind of loss didn't need a story. It broadcast itself in the lines around the mouth. The way a man held his posture even when no one was watching. "Done?" She passed. Cal asked, not out of nosiness, but because sometimes it helped to say it out loud. 2 years now, Tom said. Cancer. She was stronger than me by a mile, and stubborn enough to scare off the Reaper for almost 6. Cal gave a small grunt that almost counted as a chuckle. Sounds familiar. Army? Tom asked. Yeah. 2nd Infantry, 10th Mountain before that, Kabul, Fallujah before the sand turned to dust and everything stopped making sense. Tom nodded. Marine Recon, Iraq, Panama, and a few places that don't exist on maps. Cal lifted his mug in a silent toast. Tom did the same. Neither drank. I saw how they looked at you, Tom said after a beat, and I saw how you didn't flinch. That takes something most folks can't put words to. I stopped curing what people think a long time ago, Cal said. Doesn't mean it don't sting. Just means I've had worse. Tom nodded slowly, his jaw working the thought over. You ever notice, Cal went on, how you can survive war zones, lose friends, take fire, but it's a kid's stupid joke in a diner that leaves a bruise you feel for weeks? Tom looked up, sharp. Yeah, he said simply. I've noticed. For a while, they said nothing more. Just 2 veterans surrounded by the clatter of forks and soft music, and the invisible distance that always existed between them and the rest of the world. A young man in a Carhartt jacket stepped up to the table, maybe mid-30s, nervously holding a baseball cap in his hands. Sorry to bother y'all, he said, voice cracking slightly. I just wanted to say, my dad served, Navy corpsman. He never talked much about it, but he walked out of a diner once when someone called him a baby killer. Never went back to one again. He paused. I'm glad you didn't walk out today. Cal looked at the man for a long moment, then nodded. Your dad still with us? The young man hesitated. Passed last year, but I think he'd have wanted to shake your hand. Tom extended his instead. The man gripped it firmly, eyes glassy. He nodded again, mumbled, thank you, and walked off without ordering a thing. Cal watched him go. That's the thing, he said. You spend your life making peace with ghosts, and just when you think you've buried him, someone walks in and drags the past right back up. Tom leaned forward. You ever get tired of carrying it? Cal considered. All the time, but it's the load that reminds me I'm still walking. Tom stared at him like he saw something familiar. Not just respect, recognition. People like us, he said. We're easy to forget until the flag comes out or the anthem plays. Then we're heroes again for about 5 minutes. Cal's mouth twitched. 5 minutes is generous, he said. Just then, a voice rang out from the far corner of the diner. I serve it to. An old man with thick glasses and a tremor in his hand stood up from a table where he'd been eating alone. He raised his cup slightly. Vietnam, 101st. I got spit on in an airport wearing that same uniform y'all talking about. Thought I'd never hear someone say it out loud. Then a woman from a nearby booth turned. My brother didn't come back from Desert Storm. I was 12. My family hasn't eaten at a diner on Memorial Day since... A pause. Another voice, softer. A teenager, barely 16 maybe, sat with her dad. My grandpa was in Korea. He had shrapnel in his spine till the day he died. Said the pain reminded him his best friend didn't make it home. He never sat with his back to the door either. The room had changed. Not in volume, but in gravity. Something unseen had shifted. People weren't just eating anymore. They were witnessing. Cal blinked. Once, twice, Tom didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence had spoken louder than any speech ever could. One more person stood, a woman in her 50s with short gray curls. My son's in Afghanistan right now, she said, voice trembling. I pray every morning he doesn't come home like y'all broken and forgotten. Her eyes locked with Cal's. But if he does, I hope someone like you is sitting in his diner. Then she sat down. tears held back by sheer force of will. Sanity for a while. Cal exhaled slowly. Something inside him, not quite peace, but maybe its cousin, settled for the first time in weeks. Tom stood. "Come sit at the counter with me." Cal hesitated. "Why?" "Because you've been at table 5 too long," Tom said. "It's time folks saw you." So Cal stood, slowly, deliberately, and walked, cane tapping rhythmically against the tile. The whole diner seemed to lean toward the sound. He sat at the counter beside Tom. 2 men, 1 memory between them, 100 battles inside them. And for the first time in a long time, Cal didn't feel like the invisible man anymore. Cal didn't return to the diner for 3 days. Not because he was ashamed, not because of the kids, or the stares, or even the attention that followed after Colonel Riley's confrontation, but because something had shifted inside him, and Cal Shepard didn't know yet if that shift was good. His usual morning routines felt off. He brewed coffee, but didn't drink it. He read the paper, but couldn't recall a single word. The TV ran old Western reruns, the kind he usually loved, but the stories felt too simple now, too clean. He'd lived long enough to know that real stories weren't clean. They bled. They carried weight long after the credits rolled. On the 3rd morning, he finally walked the 2 blocks to the laundromat, just to do something with his hands. Folding gave his fingers something to believe in. The prosthetic leg clicked with every 4th step now. He'd meant to get it adjusted weeks ago, but it hadn't felt urgent until he started noticing how others noticed it. That's when he saw them again. The 3 boys from the diner. Not all together this time, just 2 of them. The loudest one, the kid with the backwards hat, and the smaller one who'd only laughed but hadn't said much himself. They were outside a vape shop near the corner, passing something between them that wasn't a cigarette. The smell hit him like a punch. They didn't see him. Not yet. Cal could have walked away. He wanted to. But instead, he walked straight up to them. The smaller one noticed first. His eyes went wide and his posture stiffened like a deer caught in headlights. The other turned slowly, puffing smoke into the air like he was trying to look tougher than he felt. In the human case, that's due to some other biological cause, like hypothyroidism, suppressed strength, suppressed energy levels, said Nelson, raising his voice even. The taller one scoffed. "What, you following us now?" Cal didn't blink. "I was walking. You're the ones standing still." Neither of them responded. Cal took a step closer, just enough to command presence, but not enough to feel threatening. His cane tapped once on the sidewalk. Steady. Intentional. "You remember what you said to me at the diner?" he asked. The taller one rolled his eyes. "Yeah, man, we were just messing around." "You were mocking someone who wore the uniform, so you wouldn't have to," Cal said. "That's not messing around." "Look, dude." "Don't call me dude," Cal interrupted, calm but firm. "My name's Calvin, or Mr. Shepard. I earned that much." A smaller one swallowed, visibly uncomfortable. "We didn't mean it like that." "That's the thing," Cal said. "You didn't mean anything, and that's worse." The tolerance shifted. "So what, you want an apology?" Cal's jaw flexed. "No. I want understanding, but I don't expect it." He turned then, not dramatic, not theatrical, just enough to leave space for them to sit in their discomfort. But as he moved away, the smaller one spoke up. "My uncle," he said suddenly, he was in Iraq. He doesn't talk about it much, but he limps real bad. He used to be funny, but now it's like he's just tired all the time." Cal paused. "What's his name?" he asked without turning. "Robbie." So Robbie Cal Shepard says thank you and that it's okay to be tired. He didn't wait for a response, just kept walking. When he finally got to the laundromat, he sat harder than he intended, his breath caught in his throat, not because of the walk, but because of the conversation. Confronting enemies in a war zone, that had rules. But confronting ghosts in public, Ones that wore sneakers and slang and too much cologne? That required something else entirely. The next day, Cal returned to the diner. Rosie greeted him with a warm smile that was maybe a little too bright, the kind people wear when they're still figuring out how to talk around something heavy. "Your seat's open," she said. "Colonel's been asking about you." Cal slid onto the counter stool instead of the booth at table 5. It felt different now, less distant, more visible. Colonel Riley was already there, sipping his second cup. "I figured you'd come back," he said. "Yeah," Cal answered, eventually. Tom nodded once. "This place needs people like you in it." "The way?" Cal asked. "Place ran just fine before." "No," Tom said. "It existed just fine. There's a difference." Cal didn't argue. He knew what the man meant. As they sipped in silence, the door chimed. And that's when everything changed. A man in a pressed suit and polished shoes walked in, flanked by a cameraman and a woman with a clipboard, the kind of people who talk fast and listen slow. "Excuse me," the suited man said. "I'm looking for a Mr. Calvin Shepard." Cal frowned. "Who's asking?" "Name's Jeffries, Channel 7 News. Heard there was an incident here a few days ago, involving you, some local youths, and—" He glanced down at his clipboard. "A retired Marine colonel standing up on your behalf." Tom shifted slightly, unimpressed. "We're doing a story," Jeffries continued, "on community heroes, small-town acts of courage, that kind of thing. We'd like to get your side of it, maybe even a quote or two." Cal looked at Tom. Tom looked at Cal. Neither of them said a word for several seconds. Then Cal leaned in. "You want a story?" he asked, voice low. "You tell him the real story. Not about 3 boys who mouthed off. Not about some retired colonel who said a few words. You tell them about the silence. The part where nobody said anything until one man did." Jeffries blinked. "He tells them that silence is the heaviest burden a veteran can carry. Heavier than gear, heavier than memories. It's the weight of coming home and finding out no one sees you anymore." Jeffries straightened slightly. That's powerful." "It's the truth," Cal said. "You still want to run it?" The cameraman didn't blink, he just kept filming. Behind them, Rosie froze mid-pour. Tom finally spoke. "If you're going to put this on TV, you better not make it about patriotism and pie. Make it about respect, about what's due and what's denied." Jeffries nodded slowly, like a man who didn't fully understand what he'd just agreed to. They left a business card and walked out. Tom chuckled dryly. "Well, looks like we're famous." Cal shook his head. "I didn't ask to be." "That's exactly why it matters," Tom said. "They're going to remember your face now." "Good," Cal said, "long as they remember what's behind it." The coffee went cold, again, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy carrying something else now, something heavier than a uniform, but lighter than shame. Something like purpose. The segment aired on a Sunday evening. Channel 7 called it Valor in Silence, the quiet hero of Dobbin's Diner. It ran just under 4 minutes. Soft piano in the background, a slow zoom on Cal's weathered hands wrapped around that chipped white coffee mug, and a voiceover that danced on the line between reverent and rehearsed. There were still shots of the booth, the counter, and a short, almost out-of-focus clip of Colonel Riley turning toward the camera and nodding once, stone-faced, proud, and unbothered. Cal didn't watch it. He sat in his living room with the television off and the lights low. The silver dollar was warm in his palm, not from nostalgia, but from the friction of his grip. He hadn't asked for this. He didn't want it. But something unexpected followed that broadcast. Not fame, not notoriety. They started showing up. The next morning, a young mother came into the diner with her daughter. Maybe 9, maybe 10. The girl had a tiny braid running down the side of her head and a pair of bright pink sneakers that lit up when she walked. She clutched a folded piece of construction paper. Cal had barely sat down when the girl approached, her mother a respectful step behind. "My teacher showed us your story," she said, voice thin but clear, "and we were supposed to draw a hero. I drew you," and she handed the paper over with both hands. A crayon sketch of a man in a hat with a cane standing next to a big American flag. Next to it, in red letters, "Thank you for being brave even when people were mean." Cal didn't smile. Not exactly. But something in his eyes shifted. He nodded at the girl. "Thank you," he said. "You got real talent." She beamed. Later that afternoon, two veterans in denim jackets sat across the counter from him. One was missing a few fingers, the other wore oxygen tubes beneath his nostrils. Neither spoke for a full minute after they sat. Finally, the one with the tubes said, "Used to think I was the only one who hated grocery stores. The hum of the lights, people brushing past too close, it brings things back." The other added, "I still count exits when I walk into a room, even in church." Cal didn't have to respond, just looked at them and nodded once. It was enough. A language without words, the kind that people who've seen fire learn to speak. By Thursday, the diner had become something else entirely. Not a place to eat, but a place to exhale. Veterans showed up in pairs and alone. Some wore hats with faded unit insignias. Others brought old ID tags on keychains or tucked away behind wallet photos of people long gone. A few brought dogs, service animals, trained and calm, sitting at their owners' feet like silent sentinels. Colonel Riley watched it unfold like a man watching a field bloom after drought. "You've started something," he told Cal one morning. "Not a movement. A return?" Cal looked around. The booths were full. Not of strangers, but of mirrors. "I didn't start it," he said. "I just showed up." That evening, the three boys returned. Together this time. No smirks, no noise. They stood just inside the door, uncertain, awkward in their bodies like kids trying on suits too big for them. Tom saw them first and stiffened, his hand drifting toward his coffee like it was a weapon. But Cal didn't move. Instead, he turned toward the boys and gave a single nod. Not welcoming, not dismissive, just a signal that they could speak, if they had something worth saying. The boy with the backwards hat stepped forward. "We're not here to stir anything," he said. "We're here to listen." Cal narrowed his eyes. "You sure about that?" "Yes, sir," the smallest one said. Tom looked like he was ready to argue, but Cal raised a hand. "Let 'em sit," he said. "Learning's hard with your knees locked." The boys sat at a corner booth, separate from everyone else, but close enough to hear. No one welcomed them, no one harassed them either. They were allowed to exist in that space, and for the first time, they didn't try to own it. As the evening wore on, people started talking. Not loudly, but not for the camera, just the kind of talking that sounds like breathing after holding it too long. A woman in her 60s recounted holding her husband's hand in a VA hospice, watching his chest rise slower and slower. A middle-aged man told of the time he spent 2 weeks living out of his truck, too ashamed to tell anyone he couldn't handle civilian life. One by one, the stories came, soft, raw, undeniable. Tom eventually stood up. "I want to say something," he announced, turning toward the room. "You all know I was a colonel. I carried that rank like a second spine for years. But what I didn't carry was my son, Stylons. He enlisted after 9/11, said he wanted to follow in my footsteps. I told him not to, told him the weight was too much. But he did anyway." Tom's voice cracked, just slightly. He came home different, angry, detached. Said everything tasted like sand. I didn't know how to reach him. A breath. He took his own life 2 years ago. The room didn't move. Not even a breath. Tom placed both hands on the counter like he needed the wood to hold him upright. "I'm telling you this not because I want pity," he said, "but because for the first time in a long time I'm sitting in a room full of people who understand, and I want to say, I'm sorry. For every time I didn't see what someone else was carrying. For every time I mistook silence for strength. He sat, shoulders tight, eyes forward. No one applauded, but someone stood. Then another, not in ceremony, in solidarity. One of the boys from the booth got up too, not with bravado, but with humility. I don't know what it's like to go through what you all have, he said, but I know what it's like to be wrong. To think being loud means being brave. He looked at Cal. You make me realize I've been afraid of things I don't understand. And I want to do better. Cal nodded once. That was all he gave. Oh, but it was enough. In the days that followed, the diner walls began to change. Not structurally, emotionally. People started bringing photos, unit patches, dog tags. One man nailed a small wooden plaque with the names of his fallen squad mates, carved by hand. Rosie set up a corkboard near the restrooms with a sign that read, "Who are you remembering?" It filled within days. The diner, Dobbin's Diner, was no longer just a stop along a county road. It had become a kind of sanctuary, not with stained glass or sermons, but with truth, with memories, with the echo of footsteps belonging to men and women who had never been properly heard. And every morning at precisely 7:00 a.m., Cal Shepard sat at the counter. Same stool. Same coffee. In different world. It started with a phone call from City Hall. Rosie picked up the line just before opening time. Cal was already at the counter, halfway through his coffee, reading an article he hadn't truly processed. She covered the receiver with her hand and whispered, "It's the mayor's office. Wants to talk to you." Cal blinked, slowly, like she'd said something in a different language. "They know I'm here?" he asked. Rosie nodded, brow raised. Apparently, everybody knows now. He took the receiver, shoulders stiff, hand firm. "This is Calvin Shepard." A woman's voice, cheerful but formal, greeted him. "Mr. Shepard, we'd like to honor your contribution to this community during our Veterans Day celebration. We're inviting you to be the keynote speaker." Cal didn't answer right away. The silence on his end lasted long enough that the woman asked, "Mr. Shepard, are you still there?" "I'm here," he said. Then, after another pause, "You want me to speak?" "Yes, sir. You've become a symbol of integrity and strength. The town's response to your story has been overwhelming. We've had letters, calls, people wanting to donate. We even had a group of students from the high school start a project on local veterans. All because of you." Cal looked around the diner. It was quiet but not empty. There were the usuals, the elderly couple who ordered split omelets, the two nurses on night shift, the mechanic who read the paper backwards from the classifieds. Nothing looked different. And yet everything had changed. He cleared his throat. "I'll think about it." When he handed the phone back, Rosie grinned. "You're not really going to turn that down, are you?" "I'm not really a speech guy," he said, sipping his coffee. "Words are better when they're earned." Rosie leaned over the counter. "You already earned 'em. Now you just gotta say 'em." That night, Cal sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. The silver dollar sat beside it, the light from the overhead bulb bouncing faintly off its edge. For the first time in years, Cal tried to put his life into words. Not medals, not ranks, not battles. Moments. Like the time he watched a medic get blown off his feet and still crawl back to finish stitching a wound. Or when he and two others held the line for 4 straight hours, while radio silence made them believe no one was coming. Like the bus ride home, the day he was discharged, when no one made eye contact, or when his little sister had to lift him into a truck seat because the prosthetic hadn't been fitted yet and he was too proud to ask for help. What could he say that wouldn't sound rehearsed or hollow? What could he say that wouldn't crack him open? Don called around 9. "You gonna do it?" he asked, no preamble. Cal didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Why'd you step in that day? With the kids?" Tom's voice slowed. because I saw myself in them. And I saw you sitting there like it wasn't your first time being looked through. I couldn't let them make you invisible again." Cal tapped the edge of the coin with his fingertip. "You think it mattered?" "It mattered to me," Tom said, "and judging by what's happened since, it mattered to everyone else too." There was a long pause. Then Cal said, "Yeah, I'll do it." The auditorium at City Hall was packed. Veterans in uniform, families holding photos, local politicians, school teachers, even the kids from the vape shop, who now sat silently in the second row, hair combed and hands folded. The youngest one clutched a small American flag. Rosie was there too, so was Tom. Front row. Neither smiled, but both nodded as Cal stepped onto the stage. He wore a simple gray jacket and jeans. No medals, no camouflage, just a clean shirt and a freshly polished cane. The microphone squealed once, then settled. He cleared his throat and looked out at the room. "I don't speak much in public," he began, voice steady, low. "I didn't train for it. I trained to do things most people would rather not think about. Things I sometimes don't want to remember myself." A hush swept through the room. No movement. No whispering. But this past week, something happened, something different. People started remembering, not just wars or dates, but faces, stories, not of victory, but of survival. He looked at the flag pinned to the curtain behind him. "We don't wear uniforms forever. One day you take it off and the world doesn't ask who you were anymore. They just want to know what you're doing now. And for a lot of us, that question's hard to answer." A woman near the aisle dabbed her eyes with the tissue. "Sat in a diner, minding my business, and 3 boys tried to make me small, tried to laugh me into silence." He paused, and one man chose to stand. Not with fists, not with fury, just presence. His eyes flicked to Tom. They didn't linger. "Since then, I've met more brothers and sisters in arms than I thought I'd ever see again. Not on bases, not at reunions, right here in this town, at booths and counters, holding coffees instead of rifles." He shifted slightly, placing the silver dollar on the podium. "This is what my grandfather gave me before he shipped out to Korea. He said, 'Keep this close when things feel too loud or too quiet.'" He let the words breathe. "For years I thought I'd never stop being a soldier. But lately, I think I've become something else again." He looked out. A neighbor, a witness, maybe even a voice. Silence again, softly. "So if you see someone wearing a hat, or limping slow, or sitting alone at a table like they're part of the furniture, don't look through them. A breath. Say something. You'd be surprised how far that goes." He stepped back. No applause. Not at first. Just stillness. Then someone stood. Then another. Then another. Until the whole auditorium rose. Not in noise, but in gravity. Tom met him backstage with a simple handshake. "You gave them something to carry," he said. Cal shook his head. "I just reminded them they weren't the only ones carrying it." Outside, a crowd waited. Some approached to shake his hand. Others just nodded and walked by, like pilgrims who'd heard a sermon they'd needed their whole lives but never knew how to ask for. And at the edge of the sidewalk, the 3 boys stood. The one with the backwards hat stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded flag pin. "My uncle," he said, "gave me this before he passed. I think you should have it." Cal looked at it, then back at the boy. "No," he said gently, "but you hold on to it. And the next time you see someone sitting alone like I was, you remember what this moment felt like." The boy nodded. Tom leaned in. "You know, there's a corner lot 2 blocks down. Abandoned rec center. Town wants to turn it into something." Cal raised a brow. "Like what?" Tom smiled. "Maybe a place where People like us don't have to explain ourselves. Cal considered that. The wind picked up a little. He clutched the silver dollar in his hand. "I'd stand for that," he said, and he meant it. 6 months later, Dobbin's Diner didn't open with the usual flick of the open sign or Rosie sliding a coffee pot into its cradle. It opened with a ceremony. Outside, in the early morning breeze, folding chairs stretched in neat rows. Flags framed the walkway. A podium stood near the front steps, framed by 2 potted plants shaped like eagles and an arch of hand-painted signs from the elementary school. "Welcome veterans, thank you for your service, and we remember." Cal Shepard stood near the entrance, dressed in a dark blazer and jeans, his service cap neatly pressed and resting in the crook of his arm. A new plaque glimmered on the outer brick wall behind him. "Dobbin's Diner, the place of honor." Beneath it, smaller words were etched into the metal, for the voices once silenced and the stories still being lived. Tom Riley walked up beside him, silver cufflinks catching the light. He hadn't worn medals either, just a pin over his heart, a Marine insignia, faded but sharp. "I can't believe they pulled it off," he said, nodding at the banner strung across Main Street. It read, "Veterans Welcome Home Day." Cal chuckled. "I kid. People wanted to help. They just needed to be reminded it wasn't too late." They stood side by side, watching the people arrive. Locals and strangers, veterans from as far as 3 counties away, a few service dogs with tags that read, "Do not pet," though kids still reached toward them before their parents gently pulled them back. Rosie stepped out, holding a tray of donuts, fresh, steaming, powdered. "First batch is ready," she said, grinning. "Better get inside before they're gone." "You serving combat veterans powdered sugar again?" Tom asked, smirking. "That's bold." Rosie smirked. "If they survived basic, they can survive my kitchen." They all laughed, softly but freely. Inside, the diner had transformed. Not completely. It was still Dobbin's, still had the booths with their worn vinyl seats, the menu with half the items crossed out and rewritten in Sharpie, the bell over the door that rang a beat too loud. But now the back wall bore a mural. It had taken 2 high school art classes, a local vet with a knack for sketching, and 3 retired contractors to finish. The painting showed a timeline of uniforms, from World War II helmets to modern camo, framed by a long table with empty chairs. Each chair bore a name etched into the backrest, names submitted by families, fathers, sisters, brothers. Not all had died in combat, but all had served, and all had been remembered. At the far right of the mural sat a man in a diner booth with a cane, leaning against the table and a silver dollar on the placemat. People gathered in front of it throughout the morning. Some just stared. Others reached out to touch it like it might vanish if they looked away. Cal eventually stepped forward to speak, not at the podium, not under the banner, but from behind the counter where it mattered more. "Every one of you who's ever felt alone after coming home, this is for you," he said, voice steady. "This place didn't change overnight. It changed because people showed up. They sat down. They listened. Sometimes that's all it takes." He looked around the room. "I never asked to become a symbol. Still don't think I am one. But I am a man who finally got to stop being invisible." He held up the silver dollar, then placed it on the counter, center stage. "I carried this through war and worse. Now it stays here, as a reminder." Pause broke out, not wild but heartfelt. People didn't cheer for spectacle. They clapped because they saw themselves in his voice, because the walls had begun to speak back. Later that afternoon, the kids from the high school project arrived, each carrying a photo of a veteran from their own family. They pinned them on the corkboard Rosie had moved to the front of the diner. The board was now titled Wall of Guardians. There were over 100 photos, some black and white, some selfies in fatigues, one with a baby in one arm and a rifle slung across the other. One boy, probably 15, stepped forward holding a folded flag in a glass case. "This was my brother's," he said quietly to Cal. "He died 2 years ago. I didn't know where to put it. Mom says it's been in the closet since the funeral. Cal knelt to the boy's level, took the case, and placed it carefully on a shelf just beneath the mural. He's home now, Cal said. People lingered into the evening. Some came to eat. Some came to talk. Some came just to sit in the booths and breathe in a space where silence wasn't mistaken for absence. And somewhere around dusk, a woman in her 60s stepped through the door. Her hair was tied back in a bun, and her dress looked like something from another decade. In her hands she held a folded letter and a small dog-tag chain. Al noticed her before anyone else did. She was scanning the room like a woman who'd been searching too long and didn't quite believe she'd found what she was looking for. He stood and approached her gently. "Well, she looked at him. Her eyes shimmered. "This was my brother's," she said, handing him the dog tags. "He was never buried properly, never found. But I read your story, and I think he'd like it here." Cal didn't answer, just took the tags, held them close to his chest, and nodded. That night, when the last of the guests left, Tom and Cal stood outside under the string lights Rosie had looped around the porch railing. "Hell of a day," Tom said. "Happier than I've had in years," Cal replied. "You believe in second chances?" Tom asked. Cal thought a moment. "I do now." Tom nodded. "I think we've got more work to do." Veteran Center," Tom said. "That rec lot, the city council's on board, you and me. We could build it. Classes, counseling, job placement, maybe even a dog training program, the kind that actually understands PTSD instead of throwing pamphlets at it." Cal smiled, slow and wide. "You serious?" "I'm old, not dead," Tom said. They both laughed. Then Cal looked out at the town beyond the parking lot, its street lamps glowing like stars caught in glass. He remembered walking these same roads with his head down, his steps heavy, wondering if anyone still saw him. Now they not only saw him, they stood beside him. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the silver dollar once more, but paused. He turned to Tom. "You ever carry something so long you forgot what it felt like not to—" Tom nodded. "Every day." Cal looked back at the diner, at the lights spilling through the windows, at the mural, at the photos, at the shelf where memories were honored instead of hidden. Then he slipped the coin into Tom's palm. "You keep it," he said. "Time I started walking without it." Tom looked at the coin like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Don't lose it," Cal added. "I won't," Tom said. "I'll carry it till someone else needs it." The wind picked up again, rustling the banner that still fluttered across Main Street. Behind them, the door to the diner swung shut, the bell jingling once. And in that soft sound, in the warmth of shared silence, and the glow of a town that had finally remembered its own, Cal Shepard smiled. Not because the war was over, but because something better had begun.